Okay.
Okay.
Okay, dear participants, today is our second lecture for valuated course as framed and proposed by the Department of History, Rabindra Bharati University. And today, for this lecture, we have an eminent academician, Dr. Sambit Mallick, Professor of Sociology at the Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati. And we know his research interests include sociology of science and technology, historical sociology, philosophy of the social sciences. And we know he worked for many projects funded by ICSSR, MHRD, AICTE, and so on. He delivered many lectures at various national and international seminars, conferences, and workshops. He also published many articles in reputed journals, conference proceedings. He also wrote many chapters in several books. He has been awarded by Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland for his legendary contribution to sociology of science and technology in India in 2017. He is also a member of Program Advisory Committee, Department of Science and Technology, National Science and Technology Management Information System, Government of India for 2022 to 25. So now I would like to request Professor Sambit Mallick to deliver his lecture for today's session. Thank you, sir, and over to you, sir.
Sir, I think
Sambit,
you're
unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Professor Abbas Mahmood. I am really grateful to. Am I audible now? I'm truly grateful to Professor Subhabruto Sarkar for kindly inviting me to deliver this lecture on sociology of scientific knowledge. See, as a prefatory remark, let me tell you, one can stop me at any time you feel like. I mean, you need not wait for the lecture to end or something. You can stop me. You can raise questions, you can express your disagreements, you can express your dissenting voices. No doubt about it. I mean, you can do that. See, I'm not a person from the discipline of history in general, nor do I belong to the discipline of history of science, history of technology, and so on. As perhaps this course is on history of science or something, I don't know. But if you look at the way I have been working. In my research, you'll find that perhaps my central focus has been on sociology of science and how research practices, how scientific practices have undergone tremendous changes in the wake of the intellectual property rights regime of the World Trade Organization. Okay. And how science has been commodified, how science, which was considered a curiosity-driven research, has turned out to be a part of contract obligations. I mean, it was considered a public resource. Now it has turned out to be an intellectual property. In this sense, the knowledge that we talk about, as you know, that knowledge and science, these two terms, knowledge within quote and science within quote, these two terms have been used interchangeably for a pretty long period of time, as if knowledge is produced only through science. That is one aspect that must be addressed. One another aspect is that there is a huge hiatus, there is a huge gap between building scientific temper in the country, in the Indian context that I am discussing, that there is a huge gap between building scientific temper on the one hand and building scientific institutions in the country on the other hand. Okay, perhaps we as a nation have been successful in building scientific institutions in the country, but we have utterly failed in building scientific temper in the country. Okay. And sociology of scientific knowledge that we discuss here, uh, it not only looks at only building scientific institutions, how scientific institutions have been established in a chronological manner or something. We don't do that. Actually, this is obsolete. Okay. Of course, it's not like that. It is not important, but given the political scenario, given the changes that we tend to see in the nature of the state itself, the location of the state within the matrix of a class-divided society, the relationship of the state with various other contending social forces, perhaps these things have led me to rethink science, uh, which must be seen in terms of the way it has been culturally embedded, it has been historically integrated, and so on. I mean, cultural embeddedness, historical integrity. I mean, the all Kuhnian position one can take, but there is also life beyond Kuhn. I mean, unfortunately, philosophy of science actually has stopped in general with Popper and Kuhn in 20th century. After even, I mean, as if life doesn't or life has not moved on beyond Popper and Kuhn. That is a significant aspect that one must look at. Sociology of scientific knowledge, when I say, there is also uh, another aspect of it that is called sociology of ignorance. That's also important. Um, for example, if you ask me, I'll say that no, I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a historian, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a philosopher, but perhaps I'm curious to know these things. Given such prefatory remarks, I'll try to dwell upon sociology of scientific knowledge. Okay, I'm curious to know. It's not like that I'm going to deliver some what Abbas Babu said, some legendary contributions or something. I have never done that. Please don't think that I've never contributed anything actually. Whatever I could do, I just try to raise questions. That is the only thing. Uh, but I still feel that raising questions also is important. Perhaps Indians academic community has been a little docile these days in raising questions, in posing questions. In this sense, I'm trying to dwell upon sociology of scientific knowledge. Uh, Generally, if you look at the way science has emerged over a period of time, I'm not getting into so many detailing of the origin of science. I mean, you people know it pretty well. And that to Calcuttan audience, man, I mean, they're the super intellectuals of the country. I'm not, I don't belong to Kolkata. I mean, you people have actually paved the way for knowledge. Okay, I'm nowhere. Uh, Prior to the 19th century, if you look at, science was divided into, I mean, science, not simply science, I mean, philosophy as such was divided into two parts. One, natural philosophy, and the other, moral philosophy. Natural philosophy is nothing but science in the present sense of the term. In fact, the term science was coined by William Whewell, as you all know, in the 19th century. I forgot. I mean, you people must be able to remember those years, but I think 1830s and so on. That he coined the term scientists to refer to the practitioners of natural philosophy, and therein, I mean, from that point onward, that we started conceiving of science as a replacement for natural philosophy. Otherwise, science was known as natural philosophy, studying nature. Natural philosophers or scientists in the present sense of the term are engaged in epistemological questions, whereas moral philosophy, I mean, is nothing but ethics in the present sense of the term. Moral philosophers are engaged in ethical questions. As you all know, epistemology is known as a body of knowledge or a theory of knowledge, uh, precisely because of the central philosophical questions that epistemology addresses. What are those questions? Those questions include what is knowledge, how is knowledge produced, and so on. That's why it is known as a body or theory of knowledge. On the contrary, ethics is known as a study of nature of conduct, precisely because of the philosophical questions that moral philosophers address. That those questions include what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, and so on. For example, if I say we have been able to produce medicines, we have been able to produce educational institutions, that's a part of epistemological practice. Uh, but whatever forms of knowledge that we have produced, for example, medicines or education or whatever you can say, uh, food, uh, does everybody have an access to it or not? Is it evenly distributed or not? These became these came under the purview of moral philosophy. Questions of inclusion, questions of democracy, questions of distribution, questions of equity. These things became important in the context of moral philosophy or ethics in the present sense of it. I don't want to bring in here the distinction between morality and ethics. I'm just, in a more general sense, I'm doing that. Had it been a course on sociological theory, I would have dwelt upon morality and ethics, the distinction, and so on, or philosophy of the social sciences. Now, what STS scholars have done over a period of time, they have not looked at epistemology and ethics separately. STS scholars, I mean science, technology, and society studies scholars, STS scholars, we have always tried to integrate epistemology with ethics. We have always tried to integrate natural philosophy with moral philosophy. The marriage between uh, epistemology with ethics, or in other words, the marriage between natural philosophy with uh, moral philosophy, gave birth to modern philosophy of science. When I say science, I'm not using science, the term science in a universalistic sense, but in a more relativistic sense. Because cultural relativism is extremely important in the context of the way science is constructed over a period of time. Okay? Uh, when I say science, science may be an inquiry, science may be a method, science may be an institution, science may be an ideology, and so on. When I say science is an inquiry, science is an inquiry into the nature and limits of a particular knowledge. You know nature of a particular knowledge when I say subject matter, scope and ambit of a particular knowledge. But when I say limits of a particular knowledge, by limits I do not mean limitations. By limits, I mean under what limiting conditions science is practiced or pursued. That's why science is not universal. Had science been universal, then whatever science is practiced in the United States of America, then the same kind of science would have been practiced in Indian context. That's why even a set theory has limits. I mean, whatever set theory that we did, in fact, up to class 10, I did whatever mathematics and statistics, whatever. Let's see, what is a set theory? A set theory is a philosophical branch of
Sambit, your connection is unstable, I think. Sambit, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Sambit? I think you have to rejoin.
He is trying.
স্টুডেন্টসরা একটু প্লিজ ওয়েট করো, বুঝতেই তো পারছো। হ্যাঁ বস। ওখানে একটু নেটওয়ার্কের সমস্যা হচ্ছে, তো প্রফেসর মল্লিক জয়েন করার চেষ্টা করছেন, একটু প্লিজ ওয়েট করো তোমরা। তোমরা বুঝতে পারছো উনি যেগুলো বলছেন? বুঝতে পারছো তোমরা? কাদের আমি দেখতে পাচ্ছি? সৌরিশ, সুজনা, রবিউল, বিপাশা, শুভজিৎ, পারমিতা, বুঝতে পারছো তোমরা উনি বলছেন যেগুলো? কি হলো?
স্যার
আমি বলছি যে স্টুডেন্ট
শোনা হয়ে ওঠেনি, কারণ দুদিকটা মেনটেন করতে করতে
না না, ঠিক ঠিক ঠিক,
আমি শুনছি স্যার।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, তোমরা বাকি স্টুডেন্টসদের বলছি তোমরা একটু মানে রেসপন্স করো। একদম এইভাবে মিউট করে থাকলে তো বুঝতে পারবো না। না, বেসিক্যালি এই কোর্সটা দেখো একটা নন ক্রেডিট কোর্স, তো এখানে আমরা চেষ্টা করছি যাতে যে সমস্ত রিনাউন্স স্কলাররা আছেন এই ফিল্ডে, যাদেরকে চট করে আমরা পাই না, থ্রু ইন্টারনেট আমরা তাদের কাছে পৌঁছতে চাইছি। হ্যাঁ, এটা তো কোনো তোমাদের পরীক্ষা বা এই ধরনের কোনো ব্যাপার নেই, জাস্ট টু গেট অ্যাকোয়েন্টেড উইথ দ্য ডিসিপ্লিন এসটিএস। এটা সম্পূর্ণ একটা নতুন ডিসিপ্লিন। তোমরা যেটা হিস্ট্রি অফ সায়েন্স, টেকনোলজি, মেডিসিন পড়ছো, তার সাথে কিন্তু এটার কিছু বেসিক ডিফারেন্স আছে। হ্যাঁ, হিস্ট্রি অফ সায়েন্স হয়তো পার্ট অফ এসটিএস, কিন্তু তা বাদ দিয়েও কিন্তু এর ব্যাপ্তি অনেকটাই। সেটা তোমাদের একটু ছুঁয়ে দেওয়ার চেষ্টা করা হচ্ছে, সো দ্যাট ভবিষ্যতে যারা রিসার্চ করবে সেই 2+2=4 এইভাবে না ভেবে তোমাদের ভাবার প্রেক্ষাপটটা যাতে একটু বাড়ে, সেই চেষ্টা আর কি। হ্যাঁ, তোমরা একটু রেসপন্স করলে ব্যাপারটা ইন্টারঅ্যাক্টিভ হলে ভালো হয়।
একদম ঠিক তাই শুভদা। স্টুডেন্টরা, আমি বিশেষ করে আমরা তাদের প্রত্যেককেই জানাচ্ছি যে তোমাদের কোনো কিছু আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং এর প্রবলেম হলে তোমরা অবশ্যই বারবার প্রশ্ন করবে বা জিজ্ঞাসা করবে। শেষেতেও করতে পারো, এখনো করতে পারো, ইট ইজ আপ টু ইউ, বাট ইউ হ্যাভ টু আস্ক কোশ্চেন্স টু প্রফেসর মাল্লিক, তাই না শুভদা?
হ্যাঁ, তোমরা দেখো অনেক টার্ম যেগুলো উনি ব্যবহার করছেন, ধরো এপিস্টিমোলজি, হ্যাঁ, বা পেডাগজি, যে টার্মগুলো নতুন লাগছে তোমাদের, জাস্ট রাইট ইট ডাউন, এগুলো লিখে রাখো, পরে এগুলো জিজ্ঞেস করো যে কিভাবে এগুলো এই যে বিজ্ঞান চর্চা, হ্যাঁ, বেসিক্যালি উনি যেটা বলছেন যে জ্ঞান চর্চা বা বিজ্ঞান চর্চা, এটাকে সমাজ কিভাবে প্রভাবিত করে, সমাজ কিভাবে প্রভাবিত করে। আমরা তো কেউ ধরো সায়েন্স কত 10 অবধি আমরা পড়েছি সায়েন্স, তাই না? আমাদের খুব সায়েন্টিফিক যে আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং খুব বড় কিছু নয়, ডেসপাইট দ্যাট আমরা কিন্তু বিভিন্নভাবে এই যে ডেভেলপমেন্ট অফ সায়েন্টিফিক নলেজ, বৈজ্ঞানিক জ্ঞানের যে গড়ে ওঠা, তাকে ইনফ্লুয়েন্স করতে পারি, হয়তো অজান্তেই করি। হ্যাঁ, তো সেই ব্যাপারগুলো এই যারা ধরো সোশিওলজি বা অ্যানথ্রোপোলজি নিয়ে যারা চর্চা করেন, তারা এগুলো বোঝার চেষ্টা করেন। ধরো একটা ল্যাবরেটরি, সেখানে যে সমস্ত বৈজ্ঞানিকরা পরীক্ষা নিরীক্ষা করছেন, তাদের হি ইজ ব্যাক, হি ইজ ব্যাক, গ্রেট,
Yeah.
we are eagerly waiting, Professor Mallick.
Harry, come on. I'm really sorry. I mean, I lost the connection.
No, this is
I'm really
part of the
sorry.
game.
Sincere apologies. What I was trying to dwell upon that when I said that science must be cultural, science is culturally embedded, critically embedded, and science is historically integrated. I mean, when I said, I think I was discussing by limits. By limits, I mean under what limiting conditions science is practiced or pursued, and science also deals with a particular type of knowledge, not all forms of knowledge. Okay, people very often say that science deals with all forms of knowledge, but I always believe in the fact that science also deals with a particular form of knowledge. The objective of science, that's why, is different from the objective of other areas of inquiry. For example, religion. I mean, the objective of religion may be to arrive at the truth. At the same time, the objective of science is also to arrive at the truth. But what distinguishes science from religion is the method that science deploys as compared to religion. Okay, science does not believe in speculative method as the proponents of religion. Okay. I'll get into this a little while later, but I'm trying to set the tone right through historical specificities. How STS scholars always attempt to integrate epistemology with ethics, or in other words, natural philosophy with moral philosophy. Okay. When STS scholars try to bring in the problem of demarcation, autonomy and cognitive authority of science, I mean demarcation between science and non-science, autonomy of science, cognitive authority of science, and so on, we tend to bring about a critique of science. Okay, but at the same time, we must be clear about what kind of dangers that which are associated with critique of science in the present political context. That's also important. We cannot, we cannot dwell upon sociology of scientific knowledge, which was conceived of in the 1970s and 80s with David Bloor and others. That I think we also must revisit them, no doubt about it, but we should also revise our thought process, keeping the present political dispensation in mind. That's very important. If we don't do that, then we'll be repeating the same thing. We'll keep on repeating. That is historically, if you look at this, the 19th century phenomenon of science, it was always perhaps STS scholars also, for a pretty long period of time, they were engaged in the internalist characterization of science, or internalist account of science, which suggests that all knowledge except scientific knowledge is socially and culturally conditioned. That's what Mannheimian position in Ideology and Utopia, that Karl Mannheim said that all knowledge except scientific knowledge is socially and culturally conditioned. That's how science became autonomous. Science is atemporal, science is invariant, science is ahistorical, science is neutral, science is objective, and so on. On the contrary, the externalist account of science suggests that no, all knowledge, including scientific knowledge, is socially caused. And the most important figure is Thomas Kuhn, David Bloor, and so on. That when they said that Bloor, in fact, in Knowledge and Social Imagery, he said that he emphatically mentioned that all knowledge, including, within quote, including scientific knowledge, is socially caused. And Kuhn, as you all know, that because Kuhn is very popular amongst philosophers, historians, sociologists, in fact, amongst scientists also. Okay. He said that science must be examined in terms of its historical integrity. Okay. Then the internalist and externalist division, which was created for a pretty long period of time, that in the 20th century, that even towards the end of the 20th century, this distinction was made very evident amongst historians and philosophers of science. That one part of some sort of STS scholars, they opine that no, science develops on its own, science is autonomous, science acts in an autonomous fashion, in an independent fashion, and most of, but majority of the scientists, they suggested that no, I mean, so not say scientists, but STS scholars, they suggested that no, science also depends on various economic, cultural, and political factors. Okay. For example, India went ahead with nuclear tests, I mean, in 74, then 99, and so on. Is it merely a scientific question or a broader political question? One must understand that. Okay. And sociology of scientific knowledge dwells upon these political, military, economic factors. In fact, social responsibility in science, social responsibility of scientists, it became very important. It came to the fore only in the context of the aftermath of the Second World War. Because the Second World War became the intellectual and political vantage point through which we tend to look at science studies, development studies, political theory, nation, because of two things which happened. One is the rise of nationalism in the context of the process of decolonization, the entire process, and secondly, newly independent nations, they also wanted to build nations independent of colonial design. Of course, India was not the thing. India designed it in a colonial framework. Okay. But India also wanted to make it a more anti-colonial framework, but somehow we also fell prey to. For example, if you look at China, you look at Cuba and others, they made it very evident that they did not want to follow any kind of colonial framework. Okay, that was. And sociologists of science or sociologists of scientific knowledge, you would find that given such dichotomy that they created, that was created because of this internalist externalist division, how to overcome this dichotomy, I think one can look at participant objectivation not observation, but objectivation by Pierre Bourdieu. He delivered this lecture, Huxley Memorial Lecture in December 2002. And in January or February 2003, he passed away. And subsequently, posthumously, that lecture was published by the Journal of the Royal Anthropological Institute. 2003, I forgot the volume number, issue number, but I read it long back, while drafting my PhD thesis in 2006-7 or something. That's extremely important when he said that science as a dynamic force must go beyond such dichotomies between internalism and externalism. He said, according to Bourdieu, that science as a dynamic force must go beyond there are two extremes. One is the absolutist, idealist conception of the immanent development of science on the one hand, and historical relativism of those who consider science to be a purely conventional social construct. Okay, that's why internalism on the one hand and externalism on the other hand, we must overcome these dichotomies, because these dichotomies are Eurocentric in nature, these dichotomies are ethnocentric in nature. As you all know, the term ethnocentrism, which was coined long back, maybe more than 100 years back or so, by William Graham Sumner in Folkways, to describe prejudicial attitudes between in-groups and out-groups, where our attitudes, our customs, our belief patterns, our practices are uncritically and unquestionably treated as superior to their social, political, cultural arrangements. In groups and out groups means our groups and others' groups. We and they, these constructions were there. That's why it is known as ethnocentric in nature. Okay. This is precisely because ethnocentrism is based on racism of the biological school of the evolutionary theory. Okay. Such racist constructions of science must be scorned off now. We must overcome such dichotomies between internalism on the one hand and externalism on the other. That's what Bourdieu said. That's why we argue that no, the distinction between internalism and externalism is not rigid but porous or opaque. And such opaqueness of such distinction between internalism and externalism has led STS scholars to dwell upon science the way it is manifested in certain material realm, maybe in politics, maybe in science, in economics, maybe in history, and the material realm. That's very important. That's why I say that I'm quoting Bourdieu, that I'm borrowing the ideas from Bourdieu that one must overcome such dichotomy. Okay, that is one. In the 1990s, the post Second World War consensus on science and state, science also is often regulated by the state, that began to be disintegrated not just in the developed countries but also in the developing countries. That was drawn into the frame of science and development during the decades of decolonization. And as you know that in the 1990s and so late 1980s and early 1990s, the dismantling of socialism in the erstwhile USSR, and India also adopted, countries like India started adopting the new economic policy in the form of liberalization and globalization and so on. And such disintegration was itself a product of the co-evolution of state and science, as well as the mutual transformations engendered by this parallel evolution. That science and state evolution. Okay? These internal changes within science are rendered more complex by the organizational transformation at the different sites of knowledge production themselves. As the so-called traditional institutions of higher learning, like the University of Teaching and Research, forge new collaborative ties, collaborative networking, and so on, and arrangements with a variety of stakeholders and clients under the pressure of a state um, that appears that only appears to be withdrawing from the major supporter and sometimes only supporter of scientific research. Um, it has become increasingly important to relook at the contract between science and the state on at one point of time, and science and society. Okay, that science society interface must be understood. This is not to state that no, these two are different domains. Science and society are different domains. No. Rather, the state and society too have been significantly transformed by the advancing frontiers of technology. In fact, the relationship of the state with the world of science and the internal dynamic of scientific and technological evolution origin has rendered the field of investigation that one might tentatively call the relationship between science and state highly problematic and contested. Okay? If you look at the works by Maurice Comfort and others when he was writing on behalf of Soviet Union and so on, and later on he changed his position. Once there was dismantling of socialism in the erstwhile USSR, you will find that Maurice Comfort, he changed his position. What he said that science, which by its discoveries lays bare the true dialectic of nature, he was trying to refer to Engels' work on dialectic of nature, is nevertheless in a state of crisis, not just in developed countries, but also in developing countries. In the first place, science is an activity of research and discovery. In capitalist society, it has grown enormously along with other forces of production, and scientific research can no longer be carried out by individuals on their own. It requires great institutes, vast equipment, elaborate organization, big financial expenditure, state patronage, and many more. But the more scientific research expands and the greater these requirements become, the more it falls under the control of the monopolies and of their governments, particularly of the military. That's why therein lies the significance of the state capital nexus. So if somebody wants to look at state capital nexus, I'm not telling you that you look at Marx Capital Volume 1 or something, but it's important to look at that. But recently, from Delhi School of Economics, Professor Sudhavasan, for example, state capital nexus. But she is not looking at it from the vantage point of STS, but she is looking at it from the vantage point of environment development debate and so on. But the theoretical underpinning is important. That's why I look at it that way. Okay, that state capital nexus. That's why the more it gets state patronage, the more it gets militarized, it becomes a part of the state capital nexus. Okay, the alliance between the political elite, scientific elite, and the industrial elite. Okay. Science in such capitalist economies is expected to contribute to profits and wars, and such science as does not so contribute is increasingly starved of the resources necessary to carry on. Science is called upon to answer just those particular problems in which the capitalist monopolies are interested. That is by no means the same as answering the problems which are bound up with the further development of science and with the interests of the people. Thus, science becomes more and more commercialized and militarized, and as a result, science is more and more disorganized and distorted. I mean, the kind of Mortonian ethos of science that we have, we know that, I mean, ethos of science refers to a complex of norms and values which is held to be binding on the man of science. That's what Merton said in Social Theory and Social Structure, that there are four types of, four ethos of science or institutional imperatives of science that he famously known as kudos, that communism, universalism, disinterestedness, and organized skepticism. Now they are getting challenged. Okay, that's why I said science is becoming more and more commercialized and militarized. One can look at Gimon's work, when John Gimon, when he replaced kudos with place. I mean, proprietary systems. Okay. No, I had to switch off the camera because I was having a little smoke. Okay. Because people, they said that they want to keep it on YouTube. I didn't want them to see that. And this is what is happening to science, not only in the capitalist world, but those which are trying to follow the capitalist world. And India is no exception to this. But at the same time, one must look at the ways in which science can and should contribute mightily, not only to giving us knowledge, but through that knowledge, human welfare, to developing our powers of production, to conquering diseases, to developing our intellectual and political consciousness, accessing the hitherto existing inaccessible ones. Yet, it is not being developed as it could be towards these ends. Precisely, I mean, how can the disorganization and distortion of science be overcome? By keeping sociology of scientific knowledge in mind, that I said the production of scientific knowledge on the one hand and its application to human welfare, conquering diseases, accessing the hitherto existing inaccessible ones, and so on. And the second part is that of theory, that the crisis of scientific ideology. The primary role of science is to discover the interconnections and laws operating in the world so as to equip us with the knowledge necessary to improve our production and live better and more fully. That's important, right? But to develop research and formulate discovery, ideas are necessary, and to work out and guide the strategy of advance of science, theory is necessary. And in this sphere of ideas and theory, the great achievements of science in capitalist society, or those who want to follow capitalism, that comes into collision with the traditional forms of bourgeois ideology of the ruling classes. And that bourgeois ideology, when I say, I mean, therein I look at what Sudhavasan wrote, a state capital nexus. Okay, that's somewhere along the way. I think along back I wrote something that in this context, the rise of modernity in thinking in the 17th century England uh, uh, drastically altered the hitherto existing conception of the dichotomies between science and non-science, science and technology, and so on. Science, which began to be posited as an act of knowing, and technology as an act of doing. I think we must such dichotomies must be overcome. Uh, but such dichotomous formulation was interrogated by several scholars subsequently, especially after the Second World War. Modernity as an ideology has guided much of scientific enterprise and its theorization. When I say modernity in a restricted sense, European modernity, European enlightenment, science, rationality, critical thinking, uh, uh, um, uh, uh, decline of the dominance of church, dominance of religious institutions, dominance of organized religion on our social public life, and so on. I mean, in that sense, I'm using modernity. Okay. Uh, uh, that's why I said modernity as an, I mean, theoretically speaking, if I say what are the central philosophical and political foundations of modernity, then I would say that holism or totality, reflexivity, rationality, social movements, and so on. But all these things can be deconstructed, can be challenged, and so on. That's why when I say modernity, in a restricted sense, I'm using modernity. Okay. Then that's why modernity as an ideology has guided much of scientific enterprise and the theorization of science. Science, both as theory and practice, is organically linked to the idea of controlling nature and mastering it. That if we look at the works by um, uh, uh, Auguste Comte, for example, uh, you'll find that Comte said, I mean, in his law of stages, there are three stages, he said, that, the theological stage, the metaphysical stage, and the positivistic and scientific stage. Okay, that you all know that if I mean, there are more students, I think, here. That's why my main stakeholders are students, not the faculty. Okay. For example, if I say madness, um, how was madness considered in the theological stage? Madness was considered in the theological stage as a divine creation. That some spirit has entered another person's body and so on. In the metaphysical stage, madness was considered a criminal trait. And in the positivistic or scientific stage, madness was considered a medical condition. That's why whatever mental hospitals that you tend to see, witness in the entire world, it's a byproduct of post-enlightenment phase. Earlier, there was no concept of mental hospital because madness was always considered either a divine creation or a criminal threat. Unfortunately, in India, we are still in that theological stage that we say that no, some spirit is there, some ghost is there, or something. Okay, unfortunately, okay, because because we have not changed our mode of production, we have not changed our intellectual and political consciousness towards our social, towards the real world phenomenon. Okay, in this sense, I'm saying that when positivists came to the fore, that they opposed, they challenged metaphysical viewpoint. I mean that nature, the literature suggests that The theological stage believes in supernatural forces. The metaphysical stage suggests or believes in natural forces. That's why nature was the subject and human beings were the objects. That's why we accorded some kind of godly status to nature. We started worshipping nature in the metaphysical stage. But in the positivistic or scientific stage, human beings became subjects and nature became an object. That's why I said human beings started controlling nature and mastering it. In this sense, human beings in the metaphysical stage used to contemplate on nature. But in the positivistic or scientific stage, human beings started controlling nature and mastering. That's why there was a transition from faculty of contemplation to faculty of control. And such transition from faculty of contemplation to faculty of control has led us to realization that no, we have started controlling nature, we have started mastering over it, and so on. By acting upon nature, human beings not only change nature but also change the social relations. That's what Marx said, no, long back in the 19th century. But a very few perceptive thinkers, including Marx, who suggested that no, you must understand the dialectical relationship between nature and human beings. Man lives in and against nature. That's what he wrote, no, in the German ideology, that sociology of scientific knowledge, at one point of time, it tries to work in favor of ideology, and also it tends to work against ideology. Look at what Marx wrote in the German ideology, that what are ideologies according to Marx? Marx, as an ideologue of the Communist Party, he was in favor of proletarian ideology, and all people know it very well. But Marx as a theoretician, that must be understood. His method. What are ideologies according to Marx? According to Marx, ideologies are myths. Ideologies are fantasies. Ideologies are inverted images. Ideologies are echoes of material life. In quest of truth, in quest of knowledge, one must purge upon her or his ideology. One must go beyond the narrow confinements of their ideology. Even Marx said this while dwelling upon ideologies in general and the German ideology in particular. That's extremely important. That's why I always say that Marx must be understood as a person who was deep-rooted in his analysis of theory and methods. In this sense, in the positivistic stage, that when human beings started controlling nature and mastering it, many perceptive thinkers have linked this idea of control over nature to the central political phenomena of the contemporary period, namely institutionalized controls of some SOME, some within quote, over others. And these some within quote again are usually not men of property in a traditional sense, but men of expert knowledge. Scientific knowledge and associated proprietary technologies have become the source of power over nature. Nevertheless, in reality, power over nature gets translated into power over people. We are not simply controlling nature, but actually we are controlling human action, human labor, human livelihood, and so on, human habitat. Look at the construction of large dams, look at the construction of national parks, and so on, you will find that we are not only yeah, we are trying to or we are or there is a portrayal, there is a presentation that we are trying to control nature, but actually we are controlling nature. We are mastering. We are not controlling. We are controlling in a way, or in pursuit of controlling nature, we are controlling human beings. Okay, and it is this domination of expert knowledge and its nexus with political power, industrial power, and so on that makes a mockery of liberty in any substantial sense. In this sense, disenchantment with demarcation between science and non-science, autonomy of science, and cognitive authority of science has led several STS scholars to delve into the examination of science in its historical integrity and cultural embeddedness. Machines, structures, systems of modern material culture must be examined not just on the basis of their efficiency and productivity, what Landon Weiner once said, do artifacts of politics, that technologies must be examined not simply in terms of their productivity and efficiency, or today's environmental movements and so on. They have also shown that no, they must also be examined in terms of their positive and negative environmental side effects. But what Langdon Weiner and others, they suggested that no, technologies also must be evaluated in the ways through which they embody power and authority. That's more important. Okay. What matters is not technology itself, but the economic and social systems in which it is embedded. Towards the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, that the way we see, we are accustomed to thinking of rationality only in certain terms. I'm not sure whether all of you, all students especially, they're familiar with Weber or not, Max Weber. Maybe Weber, he classified social action into 4 types. 1, traditional action. 2, affective or emotive action. 3, value rational or value oriented social action. And 4, goal oriented social action. All goal or goal rational social action, which is alternatively known as instrumental rationality. And the kind of rationality that we discuss today, we also are becoming more and more Weberian these days, that American sociological tradition. It's not like that Weber was from America, he was a German. But he followed the method of American sociological tradition, that Chicago school tradition. Okay. For Weber, traditional social action is based on habits and customs. Affective or emotive social action is based on emotions. Value rational social action is based on norms and values. And goal rational social action is based on objectives or goals, aims. For Weber, traditional social action, which is based on habits and customs, and affective or emotive social action, which is based on emotions, they are unreflective in nature and hence meaningless, because they are not rational. Value rational social action, which is oriented towards values, may be considered, but the entire world is operational through goal rational social action. Objectives, goals, aims. Perhaps even in 2023, our rationality, the way we try to conceive of rationality, has been examined only in terms of instrumental rationality, goal-oriented social action. In the idea of justice, Amartya Sen, I'll quote Sen, that what he said, that we are accustomed to thinking of rationality in negative terms and to identifying it with instrumental rationality, that Weberian term. The rationality of defining means to meet certain ends. Early in the 21st century, what Sen wrote in The Idea of Justice, he expressed certain doubts and the separation of instrumental from value rationality. He said that if rationality is bereft of values, if values are isolated from rationality, then there is no meaning of rationality. He wrote, interestingly, in The Idea of Justice, he wrote that prejudices typically ride on the back of some kind of reasoning, weak and arbitrary though it might be. Indeed, even very dogmatic persons tend to have some kinds of reasons, possibly very crude ones, in support of their dogmas. Unreason is mostly not the practice of doing without reasoning altogether, but of relying on very primitive and very defective reasoning. Okay, that's why we must have values. Values in a much broader sense, not in a very narrow sense. Okay, that's very important. Okay, uh, in this context, why values are important in science? Let us have some kind of a concrete analysis of such concrete conditions, and then consequences of these presuppositions for our understanding of social sciences and their relation to other social knowledge, other forms of social knowledge. That's important. And such methodological presuppositions for a scientific study of social life, that the positive science of history is the representation of the practical activity, the practical process of social development. This representation, I mean this positive science of history, that such representation or depiction consists in the observation and arrangement of historical material under the guidance of certain premises, which are themselves to be made evident by the study of the material life of each historical epoch, each historical era. Premises, in this sense, are axioms or first principles of the theoretical system of history. Premises are the starting points in the real world from which the concrete study of history must proceed. These premises are basic facts of social life, the real individuals, their activity, and the material conditions under which they live. And these premises, the raw data of scientific historical investigation, can be verified in a purely empirical way and are empirically perceptible. The materialist method that under the material conditions that Sen and others, Amartya Sen and others, they are trying to look at rationality. You will find that the materialist method differs from that of the empiricists, for empiricists, history is a collection of dead facts, and at the same time, the materialist method is not speculative as metaphysicists do. Instead, the materialist method starts with observable and verifiable facts. That's important. In this sense, I started with this remark, that prefatory remark, that there is a huge hiatus between building scientific temper and building scientific institutions in the country, in the context of our own India. That's why I said that what Sen and others, they argue that we must start with observable and verifiable facts, which must be rationally grounded, but that rationality should not only have objective, but also must critically embed certain values. Debates within sociology of knowledge or sociology of science suggest that there is a transition that we have mentioned, that absolutist, idealist conception of the immanent development of science on the one hand, and historical relativism of those uh, who consider science to be a purely conventional social construct, that we must overcome such dichotomies and values must be critically embedded in such construal of science. In this sense, sociology of scientific knowledge, which must look at least two sources of knowledge production that we have witnessed. If you come to know any third form of or third source of knowledge production, please let me know, because I'm not accustomed with this. One, I mean, the famous Aristotelian question that what is the method of science, that many from the 17th century to the 19th century, many worked out detailed detailed answers to that question, that what is the method of science, that in the form of empiricism and rationalism. And sociology of scientific knowledge um, uh, is based on empiricist, rationalist accounts of science and science vis-a-vis real world phenomenon. But at the same time, sociology of scientific knowledge in 2023 must look at the ways in which a particular state, particular nation is situated. Uh, uh, because if we fail to examine the nature of the state itself, if we fail to examine the location of the state within the matrix of a class-divided society, uh, if we fail to examine the relationship of the state with various other contending social forces, then perhaps there will be an explicit or implicit disjunction between state and society, which perhaps will not be very productive, which will not be very meaningful in exercising the science-society interface. That's why the state, as a conventional, I mean, we all read in conventional textbooks in political science that there are four elements of a state: population, territory, government, and sovereignty. But you will find that the state has been reduced to ruling elites, dominant political parties, bureaucracy, and military. And such transition in the nature of the state must be looked into when you look at sociology of scientific knowledge, precisely because sociology of scientific knowledge cannot be understood, cannot be examined independent of, of economic, cultural, political construction of the state. Thank you so much. If you have any question, please raise. Please don't think that no, I'll not ask questions, or particularly students. I don't think that. I'm sure, and I always tell my students that the more you fear, the less you learn. One cannot learn anything in the environment of fear. Right? Be a little fearless and ask any questions. If I fail to answer, then Professor Abbas Mahmood and Professor Sarkar would answer.
Thank you, Professor Mallick, for enlightening us on sociology of knowledge in general and sociology of scientific knowledge in particular. Now I request our students to ask. I think they must have several questions regarding terminology, so far as I can understand. Epistemology, I mean Foucauldian, several others, Marxian, Ovedian. So, and Professor Mallick knows Bengali very well. So you can ask your question in Bengali as well.
You can ask me a question in Bengali, you can ask me questions in Urdu, no problem.
Language is not a barrier these days.
In fact, in Persian also. ये पठान का वादा है.
Shumbit, actually, I'm just wondering, I do little bit of history of technology, basically
Mhm.
empirical study based on archives and other vernacular
Arey, you
sources.
don't do a little bit. Why you do
No,
hi-fi
no, no.
history of technology? Huh?
My
Please go
my
ahead.
my my point is,
Mhm.
the kind of STS now you guys are doing.
Mhm.
Do you think I have any place in this, that structure of STS, the kind of work I do? I mean, I'm speculative.
Mhm. I have no idea, bhai. No, what I can tell you one thing, Subho, that see, we do many things. We have been working on. Maybe I also for a pretty long period of time I also did the same thing. I mean, looking at the archives, looking at many other things I did.
No, I once I told you, I am very much fond of your that article appeared in Current Science, so far
Yeah,
as I
right,
can
right,
remember.
right.
Excellent one.
Uh,
Democratization of scientific
yeah,
knowledge.
right. I was that was a part of my MPhil's dissertation.
Right. But later on, you shifted to that hard kind of
Yeah,
STS.
there's nothing called hard or soft, uh, but actually, what I think, no, even that whatever so-called hard or soft or something, but I think as students of social sciences, as students of humanities, I think we must address the questions of the present. We must address the questions of the past. This question that people very often say that no, history is a study of the past, actually is obsolete, right? I mean, we must have that kind of connection, and we must address those questions, real world questions, because if we fail to do that, yes, it's important to maybe for publication, for this that we all did that actually, for publication or something. There was a time I was a little mad, okay, uh, but I came out of that madness now. Precisely because then I thought that okay, for some time in life I understand these problems, but that suppose when I read your book, actually, that Let There Be Light, because you never gave me a copy of that book, I had to purchase that. Uh, Bloody conjuice, man. Then,
I'll get little bit of royalty was.
okay. No, but there are 4 copies now in our library.
Oh, great. Thank
But
you.
I have a personal copy. And but when I was going through that, it's very important to look at that debate, because you beautifully posited that in the present context, right? It's not simply that only that electrification in Bengal, but you also try to posit it. See, that link is extremely important, and what kind of implications that we have today. See, I don't know. I mean, Clifford Geertz, that the interpretation of cultures. If one looks at that, our study, I mean, in social sciences, we look at the impact of this on that or something. But that is a functionalist argument, right? Structural functionalism, that complementarity and reciprocity of roles in the social division of labor and so on. As against that, but we all know that our society is not composed of such kind of complementarity and reciprocity. Rather, our society is based on conflicts. It is a conflict-ridden society, whether in terms of caste, in terms of gender, in terms of class, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of nationalism, whatever you say. We must admit that it is a conflict-ridden society. In terms of language, in terms of religion, in terms of region, whatever you say,
Several others. Right.
right? It's a conflict-ridden. I'm not interested in what is the impact of this on that, but what are the structural mechanisms of the interactions between societies, between cultures, between languages, and so on. That's where I found that book. extremely important.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Abbas?
Very interesting lecture, I think. Professor Sambit Mallick, I have one question to you
Yeah, please.
on behalf of our students, I think. Uh, shall I ask you?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think, do you think that religion and science are two things? Do you think that there was a good connection or uh, contradictions between the two?
See, that's what I said. I mean, somebody may say that the objective of religion and the objective of science may remain the same, to arrive at the truth or something, or to produce knowledge or something. But the major distinction between science and religion lies in their methods. I mean, religion believes in some kind of speculative method, and science doesn't believe in that speculation, right? At least theoretically speaking. Now, science also has started believing in certain speculation, precisely because scientists also want funding from the state, scientists want state patronage, and so on. That's why science practitioners of science or scientists themselves, they are getting drawn into that. Otherwise, at least theoretically speaking, science doesn't believe in speculation, right? Science always starts with observable and verifiable facts. I must try to verify it. I'll give you an interesting example. When I went to Bardhaman University, when Professor Sarkar invited me, he was earlier in the University of Burdwan, no? He invited me. And I left all my nicety there in their guest house. In that, I was on my own, okay? And there, I saw a ghost in Bardhaman University. Then I will say that no, I have seen that ghost. Even if you or Subho they have not seen that ghost, that doesn't matter. But maybe it is a psychological state of mind which forced me to see something which is not there. Science, at least theoretically speaking, doesn't believe in superstitions. No, at least theoretically speaking. That's why when I try to bring about a critique of science, I must bring about a critique of science on different plane altogether. I should not bring about a critique of science. Or rather, I must defend science against superstitions. And perhaps religion doesn't question superstitions. Having said this, I do not mean that religion doesn't produce knowledge. Religion also has produced knowledge.
Yes, of course. If we consider the West European context, most of the religious places, later on converted into best educational institutions.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in South Asian context, we are unable to, to convert that religious institutions into learned places institutions.
That's a religion
lacuna, I must
definitely produced knowledge, no doubt about it. But religion doesn't perhaps question superstitions. Had science not questioned the hitherto existing powers that be, science would not have reached the stage, or would not have enjoyed the status it is enjoying today. It's important, no? That capacity to interrogate. In this sense, I am trying to bring a distinction between science and religion. Otherwise, religion also has produced knowledge, no doubt about it. Okay.
Any other question?
Because religion also became a form of protest. Yeah. I mean, I want students to raise
Yeah.
questions.
They should, come up with some queries.
Sir, I have a question here.
Good
Yeah,
ask,
yes.
Moinak. Very good.
Why not goes?
Sir,
Bolun দাদা।
you just mentioned in your lecture that the science is getting militarized day by day, and the way it is mixing with nationalism and jingoism day by day, and becoming the weapon of a state. So that is becoming a big problem in the issues, like like to get to know more, or should we stop at some point? That kind of
Can you please repeat and speak slowly?
okay.
Because I have grown old. I'm not as young as Professor Sarkar.
Okay, sir.
Look at my
Okay.
beard. I have grown old. I am hard of hearing now. Please tell me slowly. Speak slowly, Baba.
You look quite young.
Ah,
So what I said that in your lecture you just mentioned that science is becoming the weapon of a nation these days. Like the militaristic approach of science is getting more often than not used, and the other thing that nationalism is getting mixed with science. That is a very tough problem for these days. So should there be a pause, or should there be a full stop to know about the militaristic approach? Like, should there be stop in the weapon research? Like
okay.
these days, hydrogen bombs are getting invented as well. So should we stop at some point, or should we go beyond and keep on inventing the weapons like these weapons? And one day, perhaps we will be standing in a point that one button is good enough to destroy the universe.
See, you're absolutely very good. Actually, I mean, I'm really. I sincerely thank Maina Kos for raising this important question. That science, when it gets wedded to military purpose, then you will find that science becomes a tool of expansionist regime. That colonial expansion, when it was there, they also made use of science, technology, and so on. No? Columbus discovered America, Vasco da Gama discovered India, but that resulted in organized, institutionalized loot. No,
Yes, sir.
are you able to follow? When you look at the objective of expansionist regimes that we have witnessed over centuries, in fact, science should be used to develop more and more human welfare activities or something. But if science becomes subservient to the dictates of the state in developing its military, then it may become a problem. I'm not telling you that we should stop here or we should, but we must have a critical engagement with that. There must be academic engagement with that, right? That we must look at it. We must look at it, or we must examine certain historical experiences that we have. See, we must learn from our past, no? As a student of history, as a student broadly, as a student of humanities and social sciences, we must learn from the past that what kind of problems that we have witnessed. Look at the Manhattan Project. I hope you know Manhattan Project, Mainak.
No, sir, I am not acquainted with that.
Manhattan Project, when Oppenheimer and Einstein, they were given the charge by the United States of America to develop this bomb, which was
Okay,
used,
atom bomb, right?
yeah, okay, atomic bomb, which was used by the United States of America on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Are you able to follow?
Actually, say I heard about it, and I know just little bit things about it, but I don't know
No.
much about it.
Now, Oppenheimer and Einstein later on regretted, in fact, they repented, that they thought that they would create an atmosphere where Hitler would be afraid of that. But they never thought that US would use that on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's why science, if it becomes militarized, then what kind of a problem? That's why we speak about the disarmament of all nuclear weapons, this, that. That's why the demand has come up, no? That otherwise there will be no human being to pursue science.
Okay.
sir.
So I think any other question? No.
Any other
Unless
question?
you
স্যার আমি তো
got
একটা বলতে
something?
পারি
হ্যাঁ প্লিজ মৈনাক বলো কি বলছো বলো
Sir, you also mentioned in your lecture that religion, the problem of religion or the superstitious to get into the way of science in the society. So even in the scientist society, you will find that many of them believe in the God and other superstitious things like Tabiz, Kaboj, and etc. So on. So even they also believe like that. So it is very tough to and make understand the society to go beyond that thinking. So how do you see that, and how should we counter it?
That's
Like
why I
obviously
always
there is a supreme power, but obviously there is a supreme power. Everybody acknowledges, but the problem is when you worship the supreme power, you also take the other things with it as well, which are not maybe necessary to go with that.
yeah, it's very important. I mean,
very significant question
very, very important question. I mean, why, Mainak, what you are saying that you visit the research laboratories, scientific laboratories of scientists, and then you will find a different scientist, and then you will find um, that particular scientist in Kalighat performing some puja.
Yeah.
That's why I always say that science is easy, but society is complex. Society is much complex. No? That
Yes, sir.
scientist, that particular scientist or a group of scientists, whoever, I mean, okay, they on a daily basis they practice something and they believe in something different in a different setup. There, it doesn't imply that they are not good scientists. Please don't think that they are not good scientists. They are also good scientists, okay? But perhaps they are not revolutionary scientists, okay? Look at the works of Pushpamitra Bhargava, for example. Bhargava, in fact, in the 60s and 70s also, 1960s and 70s, he banged the government of India. And he kept on writing against superstitions till his death. Now Chandana Chakravarti has started doing that, I mean, his collaborator. But we must understand the sociocultural milieu in which we practice science. Conducting certain experiments in a research laboratory and believing in something, that belief system, these two are different things altogether. That belief, I may say that no, that belief also, a particular belief or a set of beliefs, it also produces some form of knowledge. But that belief also must be translated into a form of knowledge. Otherwise, knowledge, what kind of knowledge? That knowledge, if that belief, if it remains at the level of belief, then it doesn't contribute to the form of knowledge. No? It will contribute to something else. That belief must be translated into a form of knowledge. When Copernican revolution was there, no, Copernican revolution, that Ptolemy,
Yes, sir.
in the field of astronomy, Ptolemy said that no, the Earth is at the center of the universe, and Copernicus said that no, the Sun is at the center of the universe. Right? Okay. Then what Copernicus believed in, he tried to translate that form of belief into a form of knowledge. And Galileo justified that later on. Okay? On the contrary, if that belief remains at the level of belief and can never get translated into a form of knowledge, there I have some problems. Perhaps Feyerabend would have argued that Paul Feyerabend against method, outline of a theory of anarchistic knowledge or theory of knowledge, something. Okay, against method, he would have said that no, let's entertain, let's accommodate this belief also, which cannot be translated into a form of knowledge for the time being, but later on it may be translated into a form of knowledge. That's why society is very complex. Philosophical debates are very complex. That's why what that particular scientist believes in, it is a part of his or her sociocultural milieu. We cannot isolate that sociocultural milieu from that. Do I make sense, Mainak? Are you able to follow?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other question?
I think so. Abbas,
Hmm.
can you please?
I think we should. No questions, I think, from our students.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then, on behalf of Department of History, I thank Professor Sambit Mallick. When I requested him, he immediately accepted my invitation and obliged us. Thank you so much. I hope someday we can invite him physically and listen. Thank you, Professor.
Then in that case, I'll pollute your Ravindra Bharati University.
Please do come. Please do.
No.
Thank you so much.
And
Please take care. Yeah, please tell me.
And I think it is our great pleasure to have Professor Sambit Mallick today
Yes.
as the guest of honor for today's session.
Yes.
And we are very thankful to Professor Mallick for his very inspiring talk that he has delivered today to our students. Basically, that is very epic, I think. Sociology of scientific
He's
knowledge.
an excellent teacher. Thank you. Thank you, boss.
Thank you, Tata. Please take care. Please take care.
Thank you.
Bye.